In today's episode, we'll take a look at a variety of different boom poles that you would use for production sound for booming a mic out over your talent. And we're going to look at one from Rode, two from K-Tek, and two from Really Right Stuff. Now, I have these ordered in price range, so the least expensive being the Rode boom pole, and the most expensive being the Really Right Stuff. So let me just talk about the differences between all of these. And most people who are working in the indie film world have heard of Rode, and most people working in the film world have heard of K-Tek. Really Right Stuff is a new player in the cinema space. They have traditionally built very high quality tripods and L brackets for photography, and they're now moving into cinema. They now have some very nice cinema tripods, and they also have a couple of carbon fiber boom poles, which we'll look at here today in comparison to the others. So the focus of Really Right Stuff has not always been the best prices, but really focus on quality. K-Tek, I think, is kind of in that same range, but they're generally, I think, for the same pole, you can get something that's a little bit less expensive than the Really Right Stuff. And then the Rode boom pole is really kind of aimed at the budget-minded filmmaker and independent filmmakers that don't have a ton of budget to work with. So let's walk up the product line here. So first of all, the Rode boom pole. This runs about $119 US. It weighs in at 940 grams. So this is an aluminum boom pole, and it has a kind of a foam rubber handle here. Its maximum length is 3 meters, that is 10 feet, and its minimum length is about 33 inches or 84 centimeters, so just under a meter there. It's a 5-section boom pole, which means there are 4 different knuckles you can see there, which you loosen to extend the boom pole. And just to kind of set the stage here, we're just going to talk about the materials and the build and the features of the boom poles this time, and we'll focus more on technique in a future video. The Rode boom pole does not have any sort of internal cabling, so that means you have to wrap the cable around the outside of the boom pole, and then to secure that so that the cable doesn't hit against the boom pole and transfer that sound to the microphone, it comes with a couple of these Velcro kind of straps or hook tape type of straps that allow you to hook the cable in under that piece and then wrap this around the boom pole itself. So it takes a little bit more work, especially if you're kind of between shots and you've decided, oh, this is going to be a wide shot and now I need to extend the pole. That can take a little bit more time. So because you may have to loosen these up, extend it, and then retighten them down in addition to the knuckles and actually extending the pole. Another thing that's been used traditionally to connect or kind of secure cables against the boom pole so they don't slap against the boom pole are these little hair balls. They're called lots of different things. You can buy them, obviously on Amazon or any kind of beauty store. And that just allows you to quickly and easily attach the cabling to the pole and works pretty nicely. So if I were to kind of characterize the special feature of the Rode boom pole, it is that it is priced affordably. It's $119. And because it's aluminum, and aluminum basically becomes a heat sink. So when you're working outdoors and it's cold, this will just suck the heat right out of your hands. Having that foam rubber cover can help with that. It insulates it a little bit. So generally, you will only have one hand on this portion here, and the other part will be there. So you're probably going to want some gloves. And in addition, you probably want gloves anyway to help reduce any sort of rubbing of your hands against the boom pole, which often can transmit into the microphone. Next up, we have the KTek Avalon Keg 100cc. A couple features about this. This does have an internally coiled cable. So you can see, actually you probably can't see, but we'll get another shot of that. There's an XLR output here at the bottom, and then you have the XLR cable up at the top here, and then you can connect that to your microphone. As you extend the pole, the internal coiled cable just extends with it, so you don't have to do anything special or mess with resecuring the cable, which is a nice feature. And in fact, that's the case with all of the rest of these, although there's slight differences in the cables. This one runs about $480 US. So it's a significant step up in terms of price from the Rode itself. It does come in at 572 grams, which compared to the 940 grams on the Rode, it's significantly less weighty. And that's because these poles here, these sections here, the tubing are actually made out of graphite as opposed to aluminum. So it is a little bit different material, and it's pretty tough, and it works nicely. I actually like graphite. In fact, these are my 2 main poles that I use most of the time, both graphite. It's been a really great material. It doesn't transfer a whole lot of handling noise, so that's nice, but it also is not metal, so it's not a heat sink when you're working out in the cold, and it's lightweight, significantly lighter than aluminum. This smaller pole I don't use quite as much. I mainly purchased it to statically boom from a C-stand, so it's not something that gets everyday use from me, but it is a really useful tool. And the reason it doesn't get everyday use is this bottom exit is a little bit problematic because between takes, if you're doing, for example, a narrative shoot and you are working all day, for example, I just did a narrative shoot on Thursday and we worked 10, 12, like a 15-hour day. It was a really long day. And so booming for an entire day like that can get really, really tiring. And in between takes, it's really nice to be able to set the boom pole down on its end. But you can't do that with the bottom exit XLR cables. That's just, it'll put too much stress on the cable, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the downside of having a bottom exit like this. But if I put it up on a C-stand and statically boom it, like for interviews, which I do a ton of, then this works just fine. And it was able, I was able to save money because I didn't need the side exit or one of these other fancier things here. So in terms of overall length, this collapses down to 2.2 feet, which is 66 centimeters, and it extends as far as 8.8 feet, 2.67 meters. So it's a pretty decent range. I think for an all-rounder, though, I like the range on this one better. Now, obviously, this one would be easier to transport if you're traveling, and that's a consideration. How small does it collapse? This is also a 5-section, and this one actually could be pretty good for travel if I'm going to do relatively short pieces, not like a 15-hour day. One other challenge with this, it's an internal coiled cable. So if you, after time, kind of twist things up by moving the sections around and, you turn them a little bit every time when you're working, eventually the cable inside will get a little bit kind of bunched up. And so it will be difficult to close it. So it will need some maintenance, but it's not really field replaceable. It's something you have to really probably send into K-Tek, or I'm not even sure if I have any of the tooling to do it myself, but I fortunately have not gotten to that point. I've had a couple close calls where I've had to kind of spend some time, loosen all the knuckles, and kind of let it unbind, and it's worked pretty nicely. But you can send it into K-Tek, and they'll maintain it for you and help you get the cable back to how it used to be. Now, one of the other potential challenges with internal cables is that when you move very quickly, when you're queuing between different actors very quickly, moving the boom pole, it can result in the cable slapping against the insides of the tubing, and that can create noise that gets transferred to the microphone as well. So I've actually had pretty good luck with the internal coiled cable on both of my K-Tek poles, where I haven't had a lot of issues doing that. If you're whipping around a whole lot like that, you might be better served by having an internal straight cable like this, or alternatively wrapping the cable around the outside of the pole like you would on something like the Rode. It's a more traditional way of doing things. I don't, working on narrative pieces and working on corporate and interviews and things of that nature, usually for the narrative pieces, which are going to be the most demanding from that standpoint, I haven't had any issues. I'm not doing like action movies. And even if you are doing action movies, usually you're not having to whip that boom pole around quite so much, but take into consideration your particular circumstances. Moving up to the K-Tek Avalon Keg 150 CCR. This one obviously is a longer pole and it's a little bit heavier. So it comes in at $608 US. It weighs 770 grams, 1.7 pounds. Its minimum length is almost a meter, 99 centimeters, and that translates to 3.3 feet. And its max length is 3.8 meters or 12.5 feet. This is a good all-round length for at least the type of work I've been doing, where I work on some narrative pieces, some corporate pieces, and things of that nature. So this is a good all-rounder length to be able to reach up to 12.5 feet and as close as 3.5 feet. So that's one consideration. Also a 5-section boom, also graphite, also internally coiled cable. This has a different exit on the bottom here. You can see this XLR is a right angle exit. That's what the R stands for. And this is nice because I can set it down between takes. So this is the cable or the boom pole I'll typically use on most narrative pieces that I work on. So I can rest it in between takes. And again, it has a nice reach to it. One question I've heard a lot is what is this kind of orange mesh material on the cable connectors? And that's something that K-Tek does. They ship the poles that way. All that is a nylon mesh, and it makes it so that when you take the rubber band off of those cables swing around, and rather than having the metal connector whack against a graphite pole, that nylon mesh provides a little bit of a buffer. So that's really all it is. It's nothing in terms of improving sound quality or anything like that. It's just protecting your pole over time. Again, the internal cable is not field replaceable, but it does, again, have this right angle exit on the bottom, which is kind of a mixed blessing from my point of view. It's nice because I can rest the pole in between takes, but sometimes it sticks out at weird angles. And so I feel like it's putting a little bit of kind of stress on the cable. Overall, it's been okay. So not a huge problem, but just some things to take into consideration there. All right, moving up to the Really Right Stuff poles. This is their travel pole called the VM35. It is $710 US. It's carbon fiber and machined aluminum. And I actually went to their factory. They're pretty close to where I'm located here in Park City, Utah. And really impressive operation they have there. They do a really, really nice job. Their focus, again, is on really, really high quality. And you may spend some more money, of course, but the idea is that you will have a boom pole that will be very reliable for many years to come. So this also has an internal coiled cable. In terms of weight, it weighs in at 750 grams or 1.65 pounds. Its minimum length is 0.63 or meters or 63 centimeters, and its minimum length in feet is 2.1 feet. Max length, 1.95 meters or 6.4 feet. So it's a relatively short pole, and in fact, I ended up using this exclusively, in fact, on the narrative piece I shot earlier this week. It was inside of an army tent, and this is just the perfect size for that situation. As I mentioned before, internally coiled cable. The nice thing about this one, however, is that it has this special cable cage. So it has a bottom exit XLR port down here, and it has this protective cage that sits around it with a rubber foot on the bottom here. And what's nice about this is that it can be removed and you can actually unbind the cable in the field, which is really, really nice. It also, you'll notice in the cabling here, they've done something unique. They put this sort of rubber kind of tab in there, and it's connected to the cable. And what that does is that when you do move the boom pole very quickly, that keeps the cable from whacking against the inside of the pole, so you don't get that sound transfer that you might otherwise. So pretty nice set of features on the Really Right Stuff VM35. A couple of additional features here. It does have a cold shoe mount over on this side near the tail, and also a 3/8 inch and 1/4 inch tap down here. This is really nice from the standpoint that you could potentially connect a wireless transmitter to make yourself a wireless boom here. So for example, for my audio limited A10 system, you can purchase this little plate here for attaching the transmitter. So the nice thing about this is, and normally this was made to fit on the top of the boom pole underneath the 3/8 inch screw at the top, which all of these boom poles have. And the idea is then you will run the transmitter from the top of the boom pole. The problem with that is it distributes more of the weight near the top. If I can, with a 3/8 inch thread tap down here, I can actually attach the transmitter down here, and that sort of counterbalances or spreads out the weight and distributes it a little bit more nicely on this pole. So that's a really nice feature there. Really Right Stuff also makes a much longer pole. This is the VM34. This one comes in at $870 US, so nearly $900. Comes in at 990 grams, 2.2 pounds. Min length is 1.29 meters or 4.2 feet, and its maximum length is 4.3 meters or 14.1 feet. So this is the longest pole that we're showing here by a fair bit. Again, CNC machined aluminum for most of the parts here. Carbon fiber tubing and a very nice rubber foot on the bottom here. This one's actually internally coiled with a straight cable, which is a little bit different. This cable is called Canary or Canary. I'm not sure how you say it exactly. Canar. Anyway, it's high quality cable, well respected in the audio world. And this is a straight cable. I was concerned that I would get this cable whacking against the inside of the pole, but I didn't really run into that issue. So it actually works pretty nicely. The nice thing about this one as well is it won't bind up like a coiled cable will on these other poles. On the not so great side is that when you do extend the pole, you need to allow some additional slack on the cable itself. The nice thing about this as well is that the cable is field replaceable. You just have a hex nuts, a series of hex nuts up on the top. You can loosen those, remove the cable altogether in the field without any special things. You don't have to resolder your connectors on the cable or anything like that. So it's really, really nice from that standpoint as well. So that's another example of the kind of thoughtful design choices that Really Right Stuff made. Now, of course, you were paying a lot of money, and I realize for those that are independent filmmakers that are self-funding all of their own projects, these are probably out of your league. But if you are booming regularly, these are professionally for pay, then these are some really, really nice choices here. This one's a little bit different from the standpoint that it's a 3-section pole, which means there aren't as many knuckles. You don't have to loosen as much to extend it out to its full length. However, it obviously doesn't collapse nearly as far. So this one's a little bit more difficult to travel with. I can fit it into I've got a K-Tek case made for carrying boom poles. It fits nicely in there. And if I had to travel, that would be kind of special baggage, basically, where you'd probably go pick it up at a different carousel than the typical baggage carousel. This one also includes, of course, the cable cage here, which is nice, again, to make it nice and easy to rest between takes, and also the 3/8" 1/4" tap and the cold shoe on the bottom here for mounting various accessories like transmitters for wireless. Now, in addition to boom poles, a thing that's really important to consider if you are going to be hand booming and manually operating a boom pole during a shoot, and you're actually queuing back and forth between actors and saying their lines or talent or interviews or whatever it may be, shock mounts are super important for that as well, because what happens is as you're handling the pole here, there are vibrations that are created and sounds that are created. So you have to have a way for isolating the microphone from the boom pole itself, and that's what a shock mount does. Now, there are different grades, and I've actually found that these are both Rycote, and I really have been pretty happy with Rycote shock mounts. I will say a couple things, though. This one's a much less expensive one. It's a pistol grip. This is really, I think, probably better suited for like sound effects gathering, where you're just going to be holding the boom like this, the boom mic, so not so much a boom pole. And I found actually when I did use this on the shoot this week with the travel boom here, and I did find that this actually did not isolate some of the handling noise very effectively. Again, it's a pistol grip. It's really made for a different set of circumstances. You can put it on a boom pole. It does have the 3/8" threads here, but it's probably not my first choice. And you'll see this will come with some of the like the Deity microphone field kits. So just be aware, this is probably not the ultimate solution if you're going to be booming out on a boom pole. One thing to consider is potentially using gloves when you're handling the boom pole. Some use cotton gloves, white cotton gloves, but other people use different types of fingerless gloves as well. Just a lot of different options out there. But that's something to consider. So this is not the ultimate solution. This one, on the other hand, has been really, really good. This is actually part of my Rycote Cyclone kit, which is a big wind cover. But just as a shock mount, it's been really, really nice, and it does do a very good job of isolating that handling noise of the boom pole from the microphone. So this one's obviously a lot more expensive. We're talking $600 for the Cyclone, but that has been one of the best investments I've made for outdoor booming is that Cyclone. It's done a beautiful job, and it comes with this really, really good shock mount. Now, you could also go with something like the Rode Blimp. The Rode Blimp has actually worked pretty nicely for me. I did use that on a shoot and got good results with that as well. In fact, it's using the Rycote Lyre technology to do the shock mounting. So that worked pretty nicely as well. And that's significantly less expensive. That runs about $300 US. So there's a quick look at a variety of different boom poles from different manufacturers with kind of a highlight on the Really Right Stuff here. I own these three and paid for them with my own money. These two are on loan from Really Right Stuff. And when I make my next boom pole purchase, I'm really probably tempted to look at probably one of these as well. So in any case, there's a look at boom poles. Hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. And if you have not already subscribed, make sure you do that. And we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk to you soon.